And hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Enter the Matrix. This time, joining me is just Nathan because Typhus is sick apparently. So, god damn it, every time. But other than that, we'll be discussing some developments of the team meta, looking at results of some recent tournaments, and also taking a sneak peek at the lists that are proposed by some of the best players attending the upcoming ITT this very weekend. What I want to do is probably recognize some trends, look at some army factions and things that we want to we aren't sure about, or specifically factions that might have pivoted or might have fallen out of favor or in favor for some of the team compositions. But to start us off with, how have you been, Nathan? What is going on?
I have been very good, dude. Recently went to BOB, had quite a busy 6 months of playing 40k. Kind of nice to be having a bit of a break until after Christmas, bar a couple of England practice days. Other than that, life is trolling on as normal. Trying to avoid putting up Christmas decorations because it's November. Because putting them up before December is sacrilegious, but each to their own. How have you been, buddy?
I've been good. I also am taking a bit of a break from attending events till after the New Year hits, after the Champions Cup and then Pyra happened. And now I'm focusing a lot on actual coaching. So I've been very much enjoying the process of learning how to teach people, if you could say that. So it is definitely something else, and I'm using a lot of the experience that I've gathered throughout the years, but it is definitely something different to do it on such a regular basis and unlike a limited amount of time and stuff like that. But I have been enjoying that very much as a part of the hobby now, instead of just playing as maximum amount of reps. And also I've been jumping armies because of that a lot, which I am also enjoying. I'm not sticking to anything, because usually what happened with me is I had an army that I was practicing for a particular team event for a long time. Then I get really burned out of it. And then I switched armies, whereas now I can literally army hop over the place without a goal and trying to see what happens. And I think it also broadens my understanding of some of the factions I've been looking at. I would have never touched or thought CK are particularly good still, but actually I've been quite interested. I can see the merit, for example, right? Yes. Whereas previously I would probably dismiss them as not optimal. So I'm winding my horizons, if you could say that.
Yeah, I think overall that does make people better players when they do start to shift around a bit. And actually the teaching aspect is quite big. I would say that's one of the reasons I say put Innis up there as one of the best players I know, because his game IQ is just stupidly high. So, and I think a lot of that's either from coaching or just playing a lot of different armies. Yeah, I think that's a big part of a good way of actually improving how good you are at the game. Is playing multiple.
100%. I can also see armies that I wouldn't normally be facing, armies that I wouldn't be focusing on, for example, but now I'm kind of forced to, and I am really enjoying that aspect of struggling with somebody against the faction, or specializing in something or developing, even though it's not something I would normally do. So it's super cool for me.
Nice.
All right, so let's do this thing that we came here to do and discuss. We would like to take a look at 3 tournaments specifically. The first one of which Awesome. I think we are good. Yep, we are good with this thing. So I've prepared a very scuffed version of Excel PowerPoint presentation, but of course it's in Google Sheets because that's all I've been using throughout my whole life. and that's the environment where I'm comfortable
Sure.
in. So the first event happened. Correct me, Nathan. 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it wasn't. Was it not this weekend? The weekend before, or 2 weekends ago? Something like that. There's so many events these days.
Okay. Understood. Yeah. So more or less happened some weeks ago. And if anybody doesn't know, this is a kind of practice. Correct me here. This is kind of a practice event for the island nations, right? Like we've got Ireland represented, Scotland, a lot of Team England's, Team Wales, Northern Ireland, all over the place. But it is an invitational tournament meant as a practice and like one of the preparations to WTC, you could say, or rather team building exercise before WTC, or like training grounds for prospects, right?
Yeah, it predominantly it's the last part. It's going to be England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, with the idea that effectively, because you can have, say, a couple of teams, and actually if you look at the England, even say the 3 England teams, there would be a lot of, let's call them big names, missing from those events, from those teams, with the idea that it's trying the larger pool of players that have applied for England this year. And I believe that would pretty much be the same for the Welsh, Scottish, Irish kind of teams as well, where they're allowed to take multiple teams, which if that means you can take 18 players, then you can actually test out a lot of people. And it's quite a good time of the year to do that because it's way before you start picking the team, usually.
Awesome. Understood. If that's the case, let us move back here, and discuss the top 3 teams, all coincidentally or not, being England teams. Curious, isn't it? Are the English actually back? Have they learned their lessons after WTC? We will maybe find out soon.
We'll see.
So these are this was a 6-man team event, and you can see that I've written down the team compositions of each of those teams. And so the England cultists, who took down the whole event with an undefeated record, and I believe a single draw, in the second round against England Enlightened, I think, which was your team.
Yes, we were 1 point of winning that round.
Yeah, 65-55. Rough. Close. Not close enough. So we've got GSC, Tyranids, Pisons, Sisters of Battle, Necrons, and Guard. What I will say, overall, which will happen a lot, I think, throughout this analysis, because we'll be also talking, as you can see in the down below, we'll also be talking about West Sydney 8-man teams event and then the ITT. I think it is well known by this time, and we have discussed this many times, that the meta is wide open. So identifying themes and threads might actually be more difficult this time around than usually. But there is definite trend of, I can safely say, looking at this, it's like sisters. I will not be looking at any sisters list, by the way. It's pretty much all Bringers of Flame. It is almost always triple exo. There is definitely variance within those lists. There's differences in like specific usage of like how many castigators, how many exorcists you're bringing, but it is very much in line of what we've been seeing and what people like Typhus have been playing. So I will be straight up skipping sisters for the analysis purposes, because I think this is the closest army that we have to being solved to some extent, at least.
Yeah.
And there surely is a way to develop within that faction. But I mean, what can you tell us about sisters except for the fact that they still slap, and they have, it's hard to say that they were significantly nerfed after the recent changes.
Yeah, they're definitely in a place where they 3 Exorcists, especially in teams, just does a job that nobody else can do. And they have such a niche space in the meta where they're very difficult not to take, effectively. So I imagine throughout the 3 events we'll see, pretty much every team's going to take Sisters.
What do you think their specific niche is if you were to make a team comp of yourself? What do you think, what specific role do you think that army fills?
So apart from just having, it's always been a thing with indirect where even if the game actually isn't that polarizing, indirect armies are very scary in pairings, to the point where quite often some people will just go, they kind of lower their score on a matrix just because they're like, indirect literally can just blow you away sometimes. So Sisters, I think at the moment are predominantly more of they can definitely prey on other gun lines. That's kind of where Typhus had them. So as long as you have something else in your team that also preys on, or potentially preys on gun lines, then you basically, you give them the difficult decision of being between a rock and a hard place. Sorry. Ghost, shut up. Give me 2 seconds. 1 second. Hey!
Oh, good. Yeah, I will I will follow that up when Nathan takes care of the dogs. I think I agree that the primary role of Sisters in the team comp is to answer the gun lines. I think they are like kind of the supreme gun line at the moment of like if you have an open table, I think they can get outshot maybe by very specific things, but Sisters will never allow that to happen because they will have the mobility advantage and they then will just wither down their opponent by the power of indirect, especially how good exorcists are against vehicles, I think helps. So I think this is their primary role, but also they are just generally amazing. And it's still kind of hard to find specific counters to them, although I do think it is possible. They are absolutely not unbeatable, and they will not have just 4s or 5s or greens across the board, but extremely strong. And I think that's the last we will mention about Sisters, and because, as I've said, they will be very much a staple, and they will repeat themselves over and over again. England Enlightened, so your team, took GSC, Tyranids, Tau, Sisters, of course, Space Wolves, and Guard. And then the White Shields took Blood Angels, Drukhari, Tau, Sisters, Necrons, and Demons. So we have some similarities, some things that have rotated. Do you think for this particular event, I want to discuss this also to have context, I guess. Do you think this is, have the teams been developed in terms of can we make the best team comp possible, or are army limitations of certain players taking a big part of how those teams have been designed?
So for these 3 particular teams, it kind of felt, so for my team specifically, these just so happen to be the armies that we actually all play on a regular, consistent basis. And I believe it was the same for England Cultists. I think the only thing was maybe Matt, who does play Necrons, switched onto Necrons because Jack plays Thousand Suns, so they can't both play Thousand Suns. I know for England White Shields, it was not the case of trying to take the best 6 armies. They were the most amount of newer people. So it was more of a case of take armies that you know that you play very well and are efficient with, effectively, which then created a bit of a dilemma for Tony, who was their Tau player, and the England captain to try and pair those 6 armies, quite understandably. But he managed to get through it slowly.
Yep. Nice. I mean, especially demons and Drukhari in the same team compositions in the 6-man
And Tau and Blood Angel.
is a little bit out of meta, I would say.
A little bit.
And Tau and the Blood Angels. Actually, Blood Angels is, I think we will come to that conclusion after looking at the other team events that I've seen pop up. But in general, I can spoil it right now. I think Blood Angels are generally way less popular than I was expecting them to be. Legitimately, throughout the events that I've seen, Blood Angels are definitely not the default Space Marines. And I was kind of expecting them to be way more popular just by the virtue of them having the new codex. People generally loving the army and like it having very positive reviews, and the general vibe of them and of the codex is quite positive. So I was expecting people to pick them up and smash into other people way more frequently, I think. Whereas I think other Space Marine options are pushing a little bit further, but we will discuss this in detail in a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I've got my own
in terms
opinions
of
on Blood
particular lists that I would like to take a look at. And let's start with the Menace, the current, I think, one of the reigning champions of this current metagame. And I think I've seen this repeated throughout the main show of statcheck. I've seen this repeated at Fireside tier list for singles. But I do think GSC are very much at the top of the meta right now. So this is the list of Danny Porter. By the way, the Polish Danny Porter. I mean, I think you have now regained control of Danny, but he's finally back to his England ways.
Nah, he's just one of your Polish spies again.
Again, year after year, it works every time. By the way, I fucking love this. This title it's just the best.
It's the most Danny thing.
It is definitely 100%. So he's playing the Biosanctic, right? I think it is called. Yeah. So we've got 3 Abominants, of course, Biophagus, the Patriarch with his Gene Stealers, and the Sanctus. We've got some acolytes with auto pistols as like the way of holding stuff, just bodies. But then the meat of the list is 3 times 5 aberrants with the Abominants. We've got a big bro of Metalmorphs, which I think differs from a lot of these particular builds. We do have 3 times 5 pure strains, so no big blob to join the Patriarch. Sorry. We have 2 Ridge with mortars, so no less cannons at all, and 2 Goliath Riders to give you some extra oomph and hide those other bodies within. I think Danny actually might be the first person to do decently with the Biosanctic in general. I think Ines kind of was I think he even specifically mentioned that his list that he brought, for example, to Pyro, was kind of inspired of what Danny has been cooking up with that particular detachment. And generally, this Outlander Crow, and as I've seen from yesterday's main show, there is definitely a possibility of even the index detachment, whatever it is called, because I cannot remember for shit, to all have play right now. And I'm going to be honest, GSC seems terrifying to face right now for a lot of factions. What do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, I think GSC are in a... I will caveat, GSC, you have to play them very well, and they probably have more randomness than a lot of other top armies with how much stuff comes back. Because I've seen Innis get no units back, and I've seen Tom at this exact event in the first round get 1,650 points back.
Let's go.
Yes.
I do love playing 4,000 points against my opponent's 2,000. That must fucking slap.
Yes. The Scottish Blood Angels player Chris was not enjoying it so much because he kept a tally as they were going along. Because obviously it's good to practice winning against GSC. Being if you can keep a track of how much stuff comes back, it gives you good information for the next time you play them or where you put your matrix as. So yeah, it can be brutal, but the ceiling is massive on GSC. Well played, and with the amount you get in the army that then can obviously come back does make it for a very, very top tier army right now, and especially in teams. And it just generally plays the game very well as well, especially on WC tables. If you can mitigate a couple of the tables where you can't hide anything, then it's very different. Even in potentially bad matchups, you're still coming away with a good amount of points.
I think it has been proven right now, and it has been proven through Battle of Britain, through the Pyra, through even earlier Champs Cup, where Ines was piloting the army. It is absolutely real, and if anybody that thinks GSC are still not real is coping or haven't played good enough player for now. That is my opinion, and I think you need to be prepared for that. What I will say in terms of countering them, I think Biosanctic is quite honest compared to Outlander Claw. It is kind of just a melee army that comes back. But for example, one of the best ways of countering Biosanctic would be to play it against Outlander Claw. I think that matchup is doomed. From what I've been talking with Ines and from what I understand about those armies, I think Biosanctic cannot play Outlander for shit. And it's going to be very interesting to see how, if GSC remain prevalent, so probably until they get absolutely bitch slapped in the next slate, I would imagine, how teams develop to counter them specifically, and what builds do they offer to actually get rid of the menace. Because I think without some specific, the army might become popular enough that without specific answers, I don't think it will be feasible to win or like top 3 an event soon enough. I think this will be the extent over which GSC proliferates throughout the meta. And another faction that will be such as that, and as let's just go back to this for now, which I don't think I have specifically linked, is definitely Guard, right? Let's just get the elephant out of the room and acknowledge that Guard is as broken as people are saying. However, so I want your hot takes, Nathan. Do you think that the Aquilon changes that went live for Warhammer Championships, World Championships of Warhammer rather, do you think that change is significant enough to topple Guard from being almost unbeatable?
Short answer, yes. I think the biggest thing that the Aquilons were doing with the 3-inch rapid to effectively, it made melee matchups, your Blood Angels, your World Eaters, certain armies, even if like Custodes, even just armies that maybe don't rely on combat but needed to combat that particular turn, it just stops them from just being able to completely blank off an entire army's ability to do anything. It also, with the rapid ingress not being 3 inches, it also stops them stealing objectives anywhere near as easily as they were before, which I think is very big for the game. Where before, rapid ingress is a really, really powerful ability. I actually think it's the best thing that they've brought in.
I think I generally agree. Mm-hmm.
Carry on. The might be a slight delay.
Oh, sorry, lag it out for a bit. Yeah. I think I absolutely agree.
I think with the rapid ingress threat gone, it is at least possible to not get
Body blocked for 5 turns straight, right? To like make it as obvious as possible of what's happening. And combat armies have at least a way of dealing with them without like things like board leaders or any actual combat army was absolutely doomed against that unit, I think. So solving that issue definitely helps. I am wondering, but I still do think Guard are obnoxious right now with the tank commander changes, and I still think they are a staple. And I think legitimately, if I were to just blind guess what 2 armies do you need to prepare for in the future team events that you are attending, or even singles, as discussed by Fireside, for example, I think GSC and Guard are right now at the very top, basically blowing punches, or like exchanging punches. I think I am very actually interested in how their particular matchup goes. I am not sure.
So the general consensus, having talking to Tom and Innes, is GSC can beat Guard. I think Mission and Guard picking table balances that out quite a lot. I think it is. I would imagine it's kind of the 8 to 12 in either person's favor. I don't know enough about the matchup. Oh, Naz is talking.
Yep, that's very, very interesting take, which I definitely would like to share. So Naz thinks the issue currently that Guard possesses is like the problem with pressure, which is very fair after losing Bolgren. But I am definitely wondering if like Guard builds, for example, didn't get too compliant with having the equivalence and the rapid ingress, and maybe just eat the bullet and take 1 unit of Bulgren, for example.
Yeah, I would take 1 unit 6. Just
I don't think many people are doing that for now, though, which I can see why. If you can just tell your captain, pairing person, whatever, I am not playing against any push and any pressure. I can just maximize my output and maximize how well I'm playing the board and just be the best army at that, right? And score massive wins by primary denial, stuff like that, which our Guard absolutely loves to do with their chimeras and stuff. So I can see just going this direction. So Nas thinks Guard wins the matchup if it goes first, pretty hard, and draws to a small win if Guard goes second. So Nas believes the matchup is Guard favored. That is interesting and definitely worth testing if you are attending any events in the future. Let's move on from the Guard situation. Let me take a look at the newly developed T-Suns, because I am very curious how this goes. T-Suns have fallen out of favor a lot, just looking through team events, but also singles. I think they haven't won an event since their changes for a month straight after being very dominant for a long time. And here we have a very normal version of them, I think you could call that. So three Inferno Master Stills, the Amarmans on the disc, and Magnus. The Sangor Shaman is quite cute as a solo piece. I think he's running solo, right? Oh, he might join the Zangors. Not sure. He doesn't have the crystal, so like the crystal trick on the Zangors doesn't necessarily work here. But this is a triple mortality for Six Beast version still. But no, not a single Exalted on disc is what makes me very curious about this particular thing. So still kind of primary denial with, or like good board play with the beasts, but no like rhinos to back up the rubrics, and definitely a lower chance of playing kind of the safe castle up game without the Exalted Sorcerers, without the slow, without the possibility of the out of line of sight shooting, stuff like that. I think, and less possibility of just dumb bolting something and going back to like a Rhino, right? So that plan is also out of the way. Do you think this is still good? I mean, it won the event, but
I think that's unfortunately where Thousand Suns are right now. They can still keep the damage if they want to, but like you say, they lose a lot of the tricks in utility, which I actually think might be more beneficial to the list than the actual, say, some of the damage output. So if you were able to drop, say, one of the Vortex Beasts for more utility in the list, I think it would still... Its cap would be lower for points threshold, but would be much more stable in a matrix. I think, a bit like Naz said with Guard, if you play anything that can rush you, it is in a difficult spot. Like you say, it doesn't have the slow anymore. It is quite fragile. You don't have to bust Rhinos for it. Like, Magnus can still win you games by himself. He's still a monster around the field, but they are definitely more manageable now without anywhere near as many tricks. So while they are still in a pretty good place, I think their dominance, let's say, in teams is probably not over, but probably are much more suited to 8-man teams than they are, say, 5-man, 4-man, maybe even 6-man.
Understood. I think I'm back. I mean, I do this fucking every time with seasons, by the way, which gets boring. So I needed a lot of convincing before I admitted they were very good. And I think I'm back at this place. So until I see Liam absolutely demolish everybody again, I'm kind of I'm not sure. Because even Jack winning the event was very unstable in his results, scoring like a 20, then a 4, then a 17, then a 0, then a 10, right?
Yeah.
Which is like wildly all over the place, depending on the matchup. So I am not 100% convinced that they are the correct choice. Definitely, like 100%, like the margin of error right now is just so fucking tiny with that army.
Yeah.
It's like working such a fine line to not get absolutely blown off the table by a mistake, for example, or like a underroll, or like the correct amount of pressure from opponents, stuff like that.
Yeah, which is why I think we saw he's got 20s and he's got 0s. That is
exactly.
He's finished with 51, which is actually a respectable score with an actual faction. But yeah, it's one of those, like, you would normally rather take like 5 10s than 20s or 0s, ideally.
100%. And the last list, actually, I will skip your NIDs. I wanted to be a special. I mean, it's. Do you have anything to comment on in terms of your Crusher?
I still really like
it.
I've swapped to the Hive Tyrant now because I played a lot of gunlines at Pyra, so I'm probably going to play more gunlines. It ended up being better. I actually think I prefer it to the Swarm Lord now. Got some tweaks to maybe try, but it's pretty much is what it is. I've talked about it 1,000 times.
Yep.
I did like a 4,000 word essay today on all my games in the last 6 months with it for the England Discord. So I'm sick of talking about NIDs.
Nice. So Tyranids still very good, especially good with the Crusher, especially good against very capable of facing any gunline, right? So if you're looking for that, definitely one of the ways that you can deal with gunlines defending is Crushnids with the triple Rapture Cannons. Very good still. And the very last thing I would like to mention is the 30 Wolfen Space Wolves with the Champions of Wrath Detachment. So we have Chris Radford on Space Wolf pivot away from the very expensive now Thunderwolf Cavalry into more of a how do I even call it? It is still a pressure build because it has straight up 30 Wolfen, which still are amazing bodies for the price. That's my opinion. It's 18 points for a guy that has 4 up in 6 up final pain, toughness 5. He runs like hell. He's very good and has very decent profile after the changes that happened at the beginning of this year.
And fire
We've got
as well,
like combat with Vanguard. Yeah, the big brother of Vanguard veterans, joined by the captain. You have Bjorn, who gives you the Vect aura, still amazing. You have Ragnar with Assault Intercessors and Ulrich with the Blood Claws in like respectively Impulsor and Rhinos. So it's kind of a very melee focused pressure list still, but it just skips the expensive cavalry stuff, right?
Yes, yeah, that's where the list was. The reasoning behind this kind of list was more than, say, what I learned from Pyra more than anything, because I've never really been fantastic at pairings. I really do need to learn it. I've been around teams so long and I'm still not that good at pairings. But something I learned from Pyra, especially watching Typhus and the other people do it, was very much armies having roles is probably more important than the overall power of a certain army. With the idea that our team was built around Guard go first on a light table. Another team, I should say, it's six players. There were 2 light tables, 2 medium, 2 heavy. So there wasn't like one of each of the big ones. So the idea being that we took Guard, goes forward on a light table. Then we had triple Exorcist and triple Rupture Cannon Nids to prey on the armies that got put forward on a light table. We then had GSC built for combat and the Space Wolf list built for combat. So they were our Super Smash Bros. To any melee matchups. We had 2 answers to those. It was just having answers to everything. And then Tau was if I was rejected, I would be the second put forward. If I was accepted, then our Tau was going to be the second put forward, which is Ret Cadre, which on most tables is actually pretty decent these days. So
makes perfect sense.
This list was kind of there just to bully
I
other
still
combat
like
armies. Yeah. And it was really good. It was actually really good. Chris did very well with this.
Yep. I think I like this a lot still. I think 30 Wolfen are still a build. I think 30 Wolfen are still undercosted. So definitely as a pressure build goes, I think even with all the Thunder Wolves, Space Wolf can work. And we will see also the other version of that in the next tournament. Actually, let's jump into that right now after discussing Battle of Britain that happened a bit ago. This happened last weekend, if I'm not mistaken. Might be like a day off, or like a week off, but I'm pretty sure I looked at the correct one that happened this last weekend. This is an 8-man teams event, 12 teams in attendance in Western Sydney. So let's see what the Aussies are cooking up. And I specifically wanted to take a look at Aussie meta because, as we are all aware, for the last at least 3 or 4 years, the US meta is the last one to develop. The English are always like half a year ahead, and then the Aussies are like 2 years ahead, or maybe they've overcooked. You never fucking know with those people. So I definitely want to look at what they are doing here. We see. So let's start with all of the hot takes out of the way, and what I'm seeing and what I am not seeing in those team compositions. We have orcs in every single team. And these are bully boys, by the way. We have a Gretsch Stompa with the Dread Mob. And the last one is, let me check. It's also bully boys. So I think it's 2 times bully boys. And then we have a Stompa Dread Mob. Fucking wild shit going on. I just want to acknowledge that.
Absolutely love it.
Not everybody brought sisters. And there is I have no fucking clue. If that was intentional, if there was like a pact, there is not a single fucking guard within the top 3.
That's what's missing.
Excuse me.
There was what I'm like, they're missing something. What's the main thing they're missing? And I'm like, it's fucking guard. None of them have guard.
Not a single team out of top 3 have guard.
Wow.
They've got 2 of them have Drukhari, 2 of them have Admech, 3 of them have fucking orcs, and there is 0 guard. Aussie meta is the wildest shit. It is legitimately every single time you look at the team event or any event there, you see the wildest stuff developing. Let's start with what is happening with the orc situation. I will just mention right now, I will not jump into that. That GSC list is the Outlander club piloted by none other than Elik Ratharas, so the actual person who cooked up the Outlander claw list that Ines stole it from. So very worth I think very much worth mentioning.
Sure.
And let's see that orcs list in detail, because this is a Bully Boys list. I'm just closing some tabs. And let's jump into that. Bonk. Michael House with the Bully Boys. Snickered, 3 war bosses, of course. 2 more war bosses, Mega Armor and the Zodgrod. 2 squads of boys, just 10s. 2 trucks, a battle wagon, big blob of regiment to join Zodgrod, what the fucking orcs names. Some other Gretchens as Chaff, 2 units of Mega Nobs to join the war bosses, and 3 units of Nobs for the war bosses to join. / you can always join them with the just the normal boys if you need them that way. This looks like orcs fucking .png to me. This looks like every single list I've seen for like months and months. Please, Nathan, for the love of God, please explain to me why this works right now. Because I don't understand.
I think it's definitely different to the kind of orc lists we see here from people I know were using them, like Brian and Courtney, who I think are much more down the Warhost attachment, or because I think Brian used Warhost for second at LGT, and then Courtney's been using kind of like it's a weirder version of the Horde list, where it's a bit more like a mechanized Horde list for things like the Surge and things. But the Bully Boy list, I can definitely see in an 8-man teams, like we said earlier with the Space Wolves, it can bully a lot of other combat armies, I think. I personally don't necessarily rate it as highly, because I always felt like the Mega Nobs, while are cheaper now and are quite tough, they just don't have quite the hitting power that I wish they had with so few attacks. I can see
especially in Bully Boys, right?
Yeah, they just kind of, while under WAG, yes, they're pretty smacky, but yeah, I've always been a little bit underwhelmed when I've played it a couple of times. But played well, it's got a lot of very good combat. It does hit very hard. It's predominantly pretty good at scoring. So yeah, I can definitely see its place in a team. It's still a very
it delivered quite good results. So Michael scored a 17, a 10, a 16, a 9, and a 12. So very decent results. They are the very solid results across the board, right? I mean, if it works, it fucking works. But I am still much surprised. However, I will not leave this particular tournament without looking at this monstrosity. By the way, huge respects to the Rat Dog Taylor and the Freakies. All of them have huge fucking titles with backstories about their list. It's madness. It's the most Australian thing ever. Actually, but it's the Dread Mob list.
Sorry, a long story from a long time ago. Not a long story, but the tournaments in 4th edition and a little bit into 5th edition you used to get points at events for writing a backstory for your army. So you'd write like a one-page essay about your army when we used to go to events and try and make it as fluffy as possible. And sometimes that was the difference between people podiuming him and not podiuming him. It was an interesting time.
Man,
but we also did
tournaments used to be fucking wild.
Well, 4th edition, we didn't used to hand in lists to our opponents, so you just hope that they weren't cheating. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
nothing. I assume nothing bad ever happened with that system.
Oh god, no! I definitely have about 6 stories of issues with that.
That's my assumption.
Yeah.
Awesome, fucking amazing. So we have the big wave with shock attack gun. Only one though. Very interesting. I would assume most of the dread mobs are lying 3 of these with the goggles. We have the street rod for infiltration, and mech with smoky gubbins. I can't remember which enhancement that is. Zod. I fucking hate this. Well, the guy who joins the 20 Gretchen with infiltration and then Zodgrod.
It's
a
got
lot
Z
of
in it.
Grets.
As a Polish person, you should get it.
It's Zodgrod. I don't understand that, but it's just so weird to say with like the English accent. With the Polish one, it should be easier. So we have the 20 Gretchen with Zodgrod. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more units of those fuckers because in Dreadmob they are insanely good, by the way. If you haven't faced that detachment yet, please never like underestimate how broken Gretchen are in that detachment with the reactive moves and all of the shit they can pull up. It's wild. You're in for a surprise if you haven't tried. 2 trucks, 3 Devcopters, I assume for mission purposes mostly. 10 Gits shooting back up, then the Lutas joined by the mech. Oh, the Smoky Gummins is probably the ignore, like extra IP or like ignore cover.
Oh, yeah.
There is something like that. Joining the Lutas. Then we have the 800 point Stompa. And then just 2 units of Zombies to do some missions. So it's a lot of bodies. Don't get me wrong. It's a considerable amount of bodies. A lot of mission play, actually. Quite a good shooting from 2 units of Gits and Lutas. And then the Stompa that will bash your head in. If it can see you and if it's able to put all of the guns into you. And there's a lot of caveats, I feel like, happening with that. But at the same time, it finally happened. It's a Dreadmob Stompa, like podiuming an event. And why I'm especially impressed by that, and like quite amused, is before WTC there was a certain period of time. There was one of our boot camps that happened just after all the changes hit, that we were legitimately considering bringing something very similar for Skark. I spent... There's a specific photo of me, actually, that someone took with me, like, double face palming, like, on my fucking knees, basically sitting on the ground, realizing that there's a good possibility we might bring a Stompa to World Team Championships, right? So this list brings me back all the fucking way. And just so you know, Ben did amazingly well with that build. He scored a 20, a 10, a 13, a 10, and a 17. 2 draws, 3 wins. Undefeated.
Solid.
I fucking love Australian meta. There is nothing else I can like say about that particular list. It is absolutely wild for me. In terms of other highlights, I will just like to mention that we have a T-Sans with no Middle Eve Vortex Beast, more like board, something similar to what Alien played, but of course less units, because that's how it goes. And then we have Aussies absolutely disrespecting the nerfs that the Space Wolves received, and telling us that maybe just ignore everything that was mentioned and bring the same shit that we used to play, but just throw out like the shooting aspect of it completely. So we have 3 units of Thunderwolves. However, one of them is a 6-man and 2 3s with a very wide complement of characters. So 3 battle leaders, then one is joined with Harold, one with Logan on the Storm Strider, which went down, and then one with the Lord with Fury of the Storm. The infiltrators who hold your backfield, some mission play in scouts, things like that. I don't understand the Wolf Scouts. I have no fucking clue why they're 10 points more expensive than the Scouts. I don't particularly know what they do. I didn't even realize that they were a unit still. And 25 Wolfen. And the Callis, actually, which is very relevant for any melee matchups. I guess it still works, just like it used to, right?
Yeah, I think this is one of those lists. I think it's a little bit like we discussed a while ago about Thousand Suns, where if it gets the right matchup, I don't think losing 150 points stops it being less than going from 20-0 to still like 17-3 and something. It still has very good matchups. Mm-hmm. I think what's probably hit it the most was the first turn rapid ingress. They can't do that anymore, correct?
Oh, can they not? I was not aware of that change. I was legitimately, if that happened, I am 100% not aware that happened.
Is it because they don't have the deep strike keyword? So you couldn't. Am I misremembering something completely? Probably.
They definitely. There was a very specific FAQ that they could last time around, and if that changed in the very recent balanced slate,
I could be talking absolute nonsense. Like, I haven't seen this list on our tables in a very long time, so I don't remember if that actually got changed.
So if you play with Space Wolf, do make sure you can rapid ingress, because that's a big thing about that particular list.
Yeah.
To be honest,
you probably can. I'm probably remembering it as a different thing from like. Because they Hypercrypt changed as well, so I don't know. It's anyway. This list, it still puts you in jail if you can't get out. It still stat checks you and it still rolls over you. So
it's still great against gun lines. Surprisingly so. Every time something comes up and it's just some wolves, right? I can surely cut through this, and then you realize that the mines won't hit and one stratagem exists, and then they surge into you, and then it's doomed. And it's surprisingly how well this goes into gun lines. However, from both, I would like to mention that both Chris Radford and this build had basically no shooting. So I think this is the part where the cuts are hitting the most. And I do think it is a problem, honestly. Like, I legitimately think putting one Vindicator in or zero shooting in is a massive difference. We were always huge fans of putting some shooting into those types of lists for like just controlling any basically threatening anything that comes up that wants to kill the cavalry or anything like that, right?
Like
just having the opportunity to threaten, I feel like, is a huge thing, and that might be missing right now, which I'm not the biggest fan of. But still, wolves are generally performing, and now that we've seen 2 like Space Wolf variants, we've talked about Blood Angels not being so popular, and we can see a lot of Dark Angels still, by the way. And all of those builds kind of boil down to 3 units of Deathwing Knights, still Inner Circle Companions. They just changed, most of them, if not all of them, exchanged their shooting aspects from Eradicators, from the Eradicator blob. I have seen some variations running Triple Vindicator. I've seen some variations running Repulsor Executioners, for example, which I'm quite interested in, like supporting some Inner Circle Companions and stuff like that. So there's the search of what do you support the Deathwing Knights and their inner circle commands and the core of this army with what's shooting from Gladius when the Eradicator package has gotten quite expensive, but that army still functions basically the same, just a little worse in that term. But I mean, a lot of armies, you could argue, are worse right now, so it doesn't matter too much. So out of all of the possibilities, and like, let's mention it outright, Black Templars have fallen off a cliff, and I don't think they're coming back. Let's be honest. I am very interested. What do you think is the premier Space Marine chapter right now that you would take into team composition? Of course, we need to mention all of those builds have a very different role in team compositions, right? Space Wolf have a different role to Dark Angels. Dark Angels definitely have a different role to Blood Angels. There's still... actually, I will use this opportunity to jump to this thing, which is the upcoming ITT. And in terms of Space Marines, I mean, there's a new challenger, let's call it.
Yeah, I was going to bring these guys up.
Yep, something is definitely getting cooked up, and let's now jump into Brian Sipes' newly found love of Ultramarines. This thing. Do you think this is the new hotness that will prove to be the best versions of Space Marines? This is Gladius, by the way, not the Ultramarines Vanguard that I would definitely say I'm kind of used to by now, and the other top team is bringing, which are the Mind Goblins, are bringing Ultramarines in Vanguard detachment. This opts for Gladius. It still has Eradicators with fucking fire discipline on the Apothecary Biologists. It has 3 Ballistas Dreadnoughts. It has a Repulsor, an Repulsor Executioner, and the Robert Gilliman attending with the Uriel, because he is probably the best thing in Ultras right now, or close to it. What do you think about this pile of shit?
So this list, it's almost, how do I put it? It's a little bit like old Ironstorm, but with like more tech ability to it, where, well, okay, it's not Ironstorm because it's not vehicle spam, but it is, having double oath is very good. It's quite easy to get your double oath off because you usually pick whatever the Eradicator shoots, they shoot, that thing dies, then you move on to the next thing. Ballistarius Dreadnoughts with full reels to hit on the next thing. If you're very consistent at putting 2+ things down a turn, that's quite good. The raw damage output is solid. I think this is probably going to be up there with the latest Marine builds. I think Dark Angels probably has the overall still the best matrix, but it's kind of the same list that's been around for months now. People know how to play it. It doesn't love some of the things in the meta as much anymore. So I think it's in a weird place of it's a little bit predictable.
Do you think this is bad against?
This Ultramarines list?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do you see any potential weaknesses outright?
Outright, no. I don't think it's got the best amount of scoring in it. I think even if it's, say, a 20-0 sliding scale system, if you can focus on the chaff units and he has to start scoring with other things, then it becomes a lot weaker. I think you could lose some gun line-offs, potentially. I think we should note that for ITT, it is UK TC terrain, which is hide your whole army in your deployment zone, but step into the middle and it's a bit of a ghost town. So long range firepower is very good on these tables, as I've been using rupture cannons for. So it's one of those. I think Brian will do quite well with it because it's very solid. Does everything that you would want it to do. I don't know what it's like into pressured combat armies. Doesn't look like it has enough shooting to deal with everything potentially. I don't know. I don't quite know where this stands completely, but you can definitely see the big damage output there. I don't know what your opinions on it. I've seen it for the first time.
Yeah. I am wondering honestly how this compares to like a very much more honest or like more old-fashioned Ironstorm list for people like Kevin Zoljan have been playing for months and months now. And I think that also is still a list, by the way, just less popular, for example. I think one of the things that are now, it's been the case for the past months, and I think this is still a discussion that will be ongoing throughout the next months, is what types of Space Marines do you need in your build? Do you even need them? Because we have seen, especially in Australia, for example, all of them actually brought Space Marines. Never mind, that's me being dumb. But I can see like the England cultists winning Battle of Britain haven't brought any Space Marines variants. I think that there's going to be very interesting discussions to be had within teams of which Space Marines variants they want to bring and what do they actually need within the team, right? Because I do think our Dark Angels will still be this anchor that just has this quite stable matrix against most stuff. We will have the pressure of the Space Wolves available if you want to counter some gunlines, for example. I am still unsure as of now what this Ultramarines specifically is trying to achieve. It just seems like a gunliney, good around faction, solid shooting, kind of very, I don't know, very Space Marine like, but not a lot of combat. So there's definitely, and then we have the Blood Angels, which I don't think are particularly super good.
The very mid
overall, but I mean, it's still a pressure list, and I think you can still do a lot with that. So one of the things I would like to just as a closure to the Space Marine topics, I think overall there is going to be very interesting discussions of which Space Marines are the best right now, and that might entirely depend on what you need. I am very curious to find out if there's if one of those becomes a default, for example, or if one of those trumps the other, because things like Dark Angels and Space Wolf have been around, and Blood Angels, to be honest, have been around since WTC in different roles, and all of them have been valid for that time. So I'm wondering if this is just a huge shakeup and then it comes back to being perfectly normal again, or like settling down in the very similar positions, or if this is a shakeup and then you can like develop new things such as that Ultramarines built, or maybe you go back to the Ultramarines Vanguard as Mind Goblins did in their lineup. And I actually, worth mentioning, I've also seen some Polish Space Marines player going also Space Marines Vanguard, Ultramarines Vanguard direction. So do watch out for Space Marines builds. Always try to match rather than picking one and thinking it's definitely the best. I think the meta is wide enough that Space Marines right now are the perfect filler for what you need in your team composition. That's my take overall. Moving us on to this thing. A lot of Admech, and everybody's trying Guard. As I've said, I absolutely none of these teams brought GSC, which is again fucking wild. And I do think that might be entirely the case of particular players not playing in those teams, right?
It's very UK as well. Like on these terrain, Guard is just bonkers.
Actually, I will mention one thing, which I am very surprised about. So Team Ignite brought Admech. And that Admech list is piloted by none other than an Ignite member known as Myson. And you'd think Myson attending a team event in the UK might, I don't know, bring fucking GSC when they're very good.
You would think so.
Instead, he has opted for a Rat Zone Corps Admech list that I believe was heavily inspired by his talks with some of the Team Polar prospects, and with it's just a very honest in terms of like Admech lists are never honest to me, and I still somehow doesn't know half of the rules that an army possesses, or like I think I think this one has like the auto 6 advance, but the cohort doesn't. I'm always confused about those things. But some interesting things about this list: 2 techno-archaeologists to screen out your board. These are the guys that screen out 12 inches from deep strike. You have a solid backfield with the 3x2 Iron Striders with the last cannons. And then we have the big blood of breachers, which in Red Zone Corps is like your big damage piece. And then you've got just a shit ton of Batmans, right? Definitely less than it used to be. But still, like, you've got a 10-man Skystalker unit, 10-man Sterilizers unit, some 5s, and like the Infiltrators to do infiltrating. Is this better than GSC? Surely not, right?
They now have the more sole right of saying they can win games because people don't know what the fuck they do. People do vaguely have an idea what GSC does now. But yeah, it was when I was like, oh, they've got Admech on the team. I looked at them to Myson. I'm like, but they don't have GSC on the team. Why would he not take GSC?
Right?
He's like Mr. GSC for a long time. But if this gives them specific answers to things, then presumably this will do quite well. Has he played a lot of Admech?
I am super curious if they have a very specific purpose for that list. Because I might be just straight up missing something. I have not talked to Myson about this particular build. It's been around the Polish community for a long time now, played by Golonka, and he's been performing spectacularly well with it. But I still am not sure if this has like specific purpose, let's call it, or is just this overall good, and maybe some matchups, or maybe this is a situation where they needed that to answer something.
Yeah, I do wonder. I do wonder if on this terrain, maybe this and the Marines are very good at preying on guard.
This is also what I've been thinking about, and this I was on the verge of saying. With the breachers especially, maybe this preys on guard, but at the same time, the tech commanders should just absolutely demolish them.
Probably, yeah.
Like the breachers they just kill vehicles like it's nothing, but surely with the clapback they die quite easily, with the shooting back on a 2-up, stuff like that. Maybe I am missing something. So definitely one of the things I will be watching out for, and I encourage everybody to do, is how Myson performs with Admech, how they pair this particular army, because maybe this is one of the ways, or like this is one of the things that are under-discovered in the current meta, and how it can answer some of the things that we might not know right now. I think this is very much worth looking into. Then we have a solid spread of like some Vodan, GK with standard, I think this is 5 NDKs list, Ultramarines Vanguard, the Dark Angels, as I've discussed. I think this is, double check. Yeah, this is a triple Vindicator version that I've mentioned. Nas mainly makes shooting. We feel you, Rafael. We do feel you. This is just Azrael with like Deathwing Knights. Just to have you an example of a list how it works. 16 or 17 companions, an Outrider squad, because why the fuck not, I guess, and 3 Vindis and the Kaleidos. Very straightforward, just kind of what we are used to with Dark Angels, but now like that Judicial less, maybe 1 unit of the Assault Instances less, but instead you have Vindicator shooting base instead of the Repulsor with the Eradicators.
Really solid.
Very solid. Still extremely good. Still will have a ton of good matchups. I think this still absolutely demolishes some of the melee pairings. I still think if Blood Angels come up against that, they just never win that, right? Ever. And I think that's the case with a lot of melee armies. I think those, for example, Orcs would hate that matchup as well. And the very last list that I would like to take a look at is to take a look at how Tau is developing, because I've seen them around, especially in the UKC. I think they are quite popular. And this is Kyle Grande's Retaliation card, which has become, I feel like, I don't know if you agree with me, this has become the standard, or like the way Tau is built right now, which is instead of bringing the Kawion or the Montka to first defend with, we are kind of going this direction of play everything or do a lot of damage with the suits kind of Tau. Instead of that, let's first defend Kawion and hope nobody counters that. Because I feel like this first defender Tau dream might be over, if I'm going to be 100% honest. And I think it has been for a while now, with things that can just outshoot it outright. So I do think this is the new default, right?
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a lot more stable in Matrix, where, like you say, if it's not getting first put forward on the light table, and then if it's getting preyed on by 2 gun lines, don't know where it actually sits into a lot of those gun lines. I'd usually kind of favor the other gun line a lot of the time. This just has a lot more tricks, has a lot more maneuverability, has a lot more scoring, has a lot more points denial, which for 20-0 system is a lot better. And it has a couple of key matchups in there as well, which is quite nice. But I'm still not fully on the Tau bandwagon. I don't love Tau that much, if I'm honest. I think there are better armies to take in a 5. But good players who've had a lot of practice, obviously Kyle's one of those people, played Tau non-stop. I expect him to do quite well that weekend.
Absolutely. I think as a very much a summary, as we are closing till the end of the thing, as I've said to start us off with, the meta is super wide open, and there's a lot of factions that we haven't touched upon, but I mean, things like Death Guard have been pretty good. Leagues of Voran are still good. Grey Knights are still good. Generally, if the army... Is there an army that you would never see in a team composition right now that you would like literally despise? Because even Drukhari, I think, can find their place. Demons have proven to be quite good. Like the Germans are good, doing incredible things with the demons, right? Do you think there is a single faction that you would not take ever?
There are ones that are close. Like, I still find it difficult to use one of your armies, especially in anything less than 8 man on agents. It's a tough sell. I think Imperial Knights is still a tough sell. Like, CK
Yep.
has a
100%.
matrix. IK
By the way,
is.
just so we have it on record, if there's one fucking nation that will bring the
Oh yeah, it's that. Yeah.
bring Imperial Knights to the event, is of course the Australians, right? So they did bring the all war dogs.
So
It's
they've
just
gone
baby knights for
CKIK.
teams. It's all fucking small knights, bro.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So they've basically
Both.
got CKIK.
Still happen.
Yeah. War dog heavy, baby knight heavy. We just go. Cool. We've
It's
got
all
two of
baby
these.
knights. And
Yeah.
It's all baby knights, and then it's breachers and rogue traders.
Sure.
Mad.
Yeah, I think they
Eldari
are
have a place
tougher sell.
legitimately. I know we've been hating. Yeah.
Third highest score at BOB was
There
Eldar
is.
with a Wraith Knight.
Yep. BOB Colin delivering incredible scores with Eldari on his Wraith Knight build, which I've been looking at, and I still don't know how exactly, but I can see the appeal, especially like with how difficult I imagine bringing out the Death Wraith Knight is for a lot of armies right now in the meta. So
with Fortune as well. Yeah, it's tough.
Yep.
And an avatar running at you.
Exactly. So, in general, as a summary of the discussion, it's a wide open meta. It's if you are going to a team event, there's some answers that some questions that you will need to answer yourselves right now. Is like, what do we do with GSC? What do we do with Guard? What Space Marines are we bringing? Are we bringing any? And then I think this is still way. I can safely say, and I'm wondering if you will agree with me, that this is the time for faction specialists to shine and to find specific answers to specific problems within their faction.
Yeah, 100%. This is slightly nerdy, but it reminds me of that scene from Lord of the Rings where he's like, the time of men is over, the time of faction specialists is now. Somebody will put that in a meme probably. But it's very much a case of you can almost legitimately take any army in a team now and be successful with it. So if you're a really good player and you know what it's good into the rest of the meta, you can actually smash face with anything now. There's still going to be ones that are more likely to race to the top. If you were looking at, say, 5-man teams, a bit like this, most are going to take some kind of Marine, most are going to take Guard, most are going to take Sisters. And probably most will, even though only one's taking GSC here, most will probably take GSC. So then you then play around with some other options. I think Necrons are very good. They've fallen off a little bit, unfortunately. But there's so many options to take now, which is really good. I actually really quite like that.
Yep, I still think Necrons slap. And I think there's, like, as I've said, Death Guard I think are really good. I think there's legitimately just find a way for your factions to function in a team. Like, build a team composition instead of picking factions for their strength, I think is the motto of it. And be aware that there's going to be some boogeymen jumping you, like from behind the corner. So if you prepare for those, I think you're good with almost anything. And that should be the end of the discussion. Let's do a little bit of the plugs and move on to show questions. So this has been another episode of Into the Matrix. Hope you enjoyed it. Do check out our sponsors. Link to whom you have all linked in the description down below. And check out our Patreon if you want to get into our Discord with lots of discussions happening all around the place and vibe check happening right now. So a great way to practice against some top level opponents. There's all the shows on the network, of course. Check out the main show that happened yesterday and is happening every Tuesday. Do check out Take All Commerce do check out Steve Joel's Champions of 40K, which is one of my favorite shows, by the way. Highly recommend it. If you would like to get help with your 40K play, with your teams, with anything like that, we do coaching. As you have heard from the intro, I do coaching now. So if you would like some help with upcoming team events, especially, or just developing as a player, I am definitely focusing more on teams than anything else. But if you would like to hit me up in any regard, do so at our email. We have 2 new coaches that have been recently added to the roster, which is none other than Nassim Hussein and Liam VSL, which you might say are pretty good fucking players. So if you need coaching in any of their particular armies, I encourage you to do so. I think that should be it for plugs, keeping sweet and short, and let's move on into show questions. Put them in the chat, put them in the specific Discord channel that I've created to not have them questions missed. And you have a couple of minutes to do so before we answer all of them, and then we're going away. Start with the first one from McWhirp. Do you have any suggestions for ways GW can approach balancing for teams events while not ruining factions in singles? For example, if the team's list is too good but has 4-5 terrible matchups, it just gets to dodge. Sorry, didn't paste the whole thing fully. Nathan, do you think there's a way to balance for teams? I am skeptical.
I think I have to decline to answer this one, unfortunately, because
Understood.
I can't actually speak on GW's behalf. So take it away, Pumba.
Understood. I'm gonna happily take it away. I'm gonna be honest. I think it's ridiculously hard to do something like that. And I'm gonna be honest. I don't think GW should do that. I think there might not be a way to do this properly, and I think it might, to some extent, I guess, benefit just the team's aspect. I really struggle to see how they balance the teams without ruining the factions in singles. And I think the teams are generally designed from the ground up, and like the whole format is designed to work where the metas are unideal or skewed in some direction or unbalanced, right? This is what we've been saying for years and years and years, that teams are one of the best plays, the best play of playing 40K, because how easy it is for it to dampen the blow of unbalanced meta. Because if one faction is unbalanced, everybody will bring it, for example, stuff like that. So I don't necessarily think that GWs should focus on balanced in teams. And I think teams also benefit for singles being balanced as well. So there's no particular need for them to target teams just straight up. And if there's one faction that is broken in singles, and as you mentioned, and if the team list is too good but has 4 to 5 terrible matchups, it's definitely not too good, by the way. The problem arises where basically what I would say, if there's a faction that you can position and there is not going to be 2 answers to it, especially from the first defender position, right? So when David brought his guard to Pyro Cup, we were able to first defend it every single time, and none of the teams found the solution to that. No teams brought 2 armies that could first attack into it. Maybe they were underprepared, or maybe that didn't exist, but that faction would have been a problem, right? That faction no longer exists, and if that existed, it's surely too strong in singles as well. So kind of not really the case where the army is only good in teams or overpowered in teams. What factions do you think currently gets the most improvement out of going from singles to teams? Thong. I think any particular build that will struggle against one thing. Honestly, I'm inclined to say Death Guard, but Death Guard aren't bad in singles. I don't necessarily think they're bad.
For me, I think the ones that benefit from teams the most are the ones that actually are the more polarizing. Your Demons, your Drakari, your Thunderwolf Cav, because in singles they probably do have some very hard counters that are very popular. Whereas if you can then go, I can avoid those, say, 3 armies, the other 5 I'm good into, that's where they can maybe flourish. I think any army where if the meta is Dark Angels, Sisters, GSC, and Guard, and 3 of the 4 of those are bad for you, then that list is probably going to struggle at singles. It probably might not struggle at teams. I think that they probably benefit the most. But then again, like Triple Exorcist, I think is almost better in teams than it is in singles. Yeah, sometimes they're also.
Listen, what if the answer is Imperial Knights? Because they can fit a skew. Like maybe you just build a team composition that is just all skew, and then they fit, and then they benefit the most. Maybe that's the answer. Honestly, as we've said, like from legitimate answer, it's very difficult. From if you want to have useful information, any army that has bad matchups into top of meta, so things that if you are a good army, asterisk, I cannot play 3 exos, for example, right? If that's your list, if that's your army, it will definitely benefit from teams format.
Yeah.
You basically have a very good list or very good army that cannot play some particular matchups. If you have that, you cannot probably bring it to singles and expect to top 3 it in teams that could definitely shine. Moving on, can you pin GSC? If so, with what? If not, what's your pairing strategy to contain them? Straight up, I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure.
There are a couple of builds that, from when I've talked to Innis, he said he lost to Andy at LGT using Hypercrypt Necrons. I think the thick Necron list is quite good into GSC. Monoliths, Vaults are difficult for GSC to kill, and they do have the output to rinse a lot of squads. So if you don't get enough stuff back, they're tricky. I think, like we discussed earlier, Guard can be very tough for them. I think especially with where Krillins were. I'm not sure with now where Krillins are currently. Because I haven't had enough matchups into them, but I think a little bit of it comes down to mission, which turn you get, and terrain. If you play them on a super light table in Purge and you get first turn, potentially, they're all like little things that can potentially stack into your favor.
I think it will be particularly difficult to pin GSC because they have quite a wide build range right now, especially with Outlander and the Biocycling of being good. I think this is the homework, as to say, for everybody to find those particular counters and to think about how they can, within their team, try to make sure that they aren't getting destroyed by GSC. They have weaknesses. If you want help with how to deal with GSC, I encourage everybody to watch the reports that Ines did about his Outlander and his Biopsychic. He's done both now. And I think you can learn a lot about what this army is weak against and what it hates. So like this information you can possibly translate into your own team composition, your own army, to have a build, for example, developed to counter GSC. Because straight up, it's going to be difficult just because there's like 2 main builds and possibly there's more coming along the way. This is, I think, the biggest strength of the army right now. But like, just why I find this difficult to answer is because I was playing with Ines at different team events, and I'm looking at his, like, I'm literally scrolling through some of the tables that he's done for us, some matrices. He didn't have a lot of bad matchups, but that also is the case where he was still under the radar with the GSC, I think. So none of the teams expected GSC to happen, for example. I think this is legitimately the homework for everybody to like find out what GSC is bad about, against. And I think when with how popular they are becoming, I think a metadata dashboard that we have will be a very useful tool to use of how this to see what wins against them quite consistently. So like that's not a Strix Dread Knight. I think that might suck. Yes, I think that's might suck, but maybe also drawish. Not sure.
Yeah,
I think
I don't think you can actually pull away.
It's difficult. It for sure is difficult, but I encourage everybody to at least try and like work this problem out, even though we don't have a straight answer to give you right now. I'm taking Nathan's Battle of Britain list to the ITT and top tips and tricks. How is the guard matchup? What's the best use for the Trigon?
Top tips and tricks. I kind of use the list as I'm not a hyper aggressive player, so it's more of a do as minimal trades as possible to try and make your opponent overcommit. So you basically lay traps for, I put a Lictor on an objective. What are you going to do to deal with it? Okay, it comes out. What have you traded for a Lictor? Okay, now I put Hummelgaunts on objective because I've then shot that unit that kills me. Then around mid-game point, you start putting Tyrannifexes on the objective, and then they go, oh, actually, I don't have a lot to deal with that. I have to overcommit now to the point where you can then just blast away a lot of the things that have come into your lines. It's very good into other tank armies. The Guard matchup it's probably slightly in Guard's favor, but because of the Aquilins, minus the Aquilins who are not rapiding anymore, it's probably a closer game. You're very good at putting tank commanders down, and you can actually do so while staying out of their shoot-back range, which is nice. It depends how much scoring they take a little bit. If they actually have a decent amount of scoring, it's a lot closer game. If they've got all tanks, it's probably okay for you. Best use of the Trigon, I pretty much always rapid ingress it for 3 inches and OC6 something. It almost always gets me 5 points. Or you rapid ingress it and then move it through a wall to then charge somebody, usually denying them points, or if you can do both in the same thing, it's fantastic. Rapid ingress, take 5 points, or deny points, move through a wall, charge something on another objective, or just generally mess up their battle plan. The Trigon's fantastic in making gun lines have to rethink how they do all their movement, which is only beneficial for you. So you'll have a blast. It's a pretty tough list. If you have a monster low on wounds, please run and charge it into people's armies because they always kill it and they always forget that you can auto-explode for D6 mortal wounds. The amount of times that people have messed that up and they've gone, I just took 66 mortal wounds for nothing. Great, I forgot about that. Go have fun. It's a fun army to use. It's pretty forgiving. It's pretty reliable. People don't fully kill things, then you get +1 to hit, +1 to wound. It's great. Enjoy.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you for that. Very enlightening. And we have a last question from Redrum. Thank you for the €5. What can they do in the December slate to make Custodians less boring and more interesting for players and teams? In your opinion, of course. I'm actually going to take that one because I think I've discussed this a little bit previously. I think what is holding back that army is legitimately the fact that Wardens have a 4-up Feel No Pain still. I think this is a bad mechanic that should slowly wither away in the game. And in my opinion, that might allow them to buff some other things and like make the army more interesting in terms of play. Because so far, all we've seen from Custodians this edition, and for the longest time from what I can remember, is blobs of infantry, usually that punch quite good, are quite defensive, and just run at you, hide behind ruins, and maybe threaten you and do that like dance of pressure. Maybe you support them with, like you've got your rapid ignis voluntary threat. Maybe you support them with Khaled's graph tanks, and that's pretty much all the difference. I would like them to move away from Wardens being so crucial for this army to function. I would like them to buff bikes somehow, because that unit I hate it with a passion. Like I love the unit of bikes. I've been using them they are suffering for the sins of past editions for sure, because they've been amazing and the core mainstay of the faction. But I think they are a mobile threat that the Custodians are lacking, and also a shooting threat. So they might a return to form of those particular data sheets, I think, might alleviate the army to be more mobile, more like just feel better to play. Let's be honest. So that's my honest opinion about that. Anything to add?
Yeah, Custodes kind of fall into the same issue as, say, World Eaters or a little bit Blood Angels at the moment, where things like 3-wound elite infantry, unfortunately at the moment there is a lot of 3 damage things in the game. Exos, Sister Castigators, Predator Destructors. They unfortunately fall into that annoying group of these elite infantry are kind of too expensive and are too easy for some armies to put down. So it becomes that fine, difficult balancing act of if they're too cheap, they dominate the meta. If they're too expensive, they just don't get taken. And they just, like you say, outside of the Wardens, they just lost a lot of defensive buffs. So they become kind of expensive infantry, which is just not a great recipe for not the most mobile army. Again, because things like bikes are not that popular. So, yeah, that's kind of where they're struggling compared to other armies.
Yeah, I think they just need a wider amount of things to choose from. I think, for example, even pivoting to dreadnoughts would be a nice thing for them to do, but they all move 6 and it's sad rather than fun. It's even more just I move 6 and I'm sad now. Yeah. So I think some mobility in the army would go a long way, like mobile threats. Okay, and with that question, let's head out. Thank you very much for the show. Thank you for watching. We'll be catching you at the next one. Please do bother Typhus on our Discords to upload all of our episodes, because he's promised that he's going to get to work on it tomorrow. So make sure to ping him relentlessly through the next 24 hours to make sure that he's going to do that. Thank you very much. And for now, let's head off and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
See you all.